My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 31, and last week something happened that changed my life forever. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my dad rang me in the middle of a security review. The dashboard on my second monitor was an ocean of green with a single island of orange, an anomaly I'd been tracking for 2 hours. His name flashed across my phone, and I had that strange childlike reflex to straighten my back, to sound agreeable. "Liv," he said, "all business. About Thanksgiving. Best if you sit this one out." I actually laughed. "What?" "It's just Vanessa's bringing someone important. Traditional family. Big deal for her future." He paused like he was reading an email while speaking. "We don't want any confusion." Confusion? I spun slowly in my chair. The city spread out below my window like graphite and glass. "Because I exist? You know what I mean," he said. "All the business talk, the technical terms. Bradley's people have clear values. So do I said. One of mine is not being uninvited from my own family's holiday." He exhaled, that familiar management's version of a lullaby. "Don't make this a statement, Olivia. It's one dinner." After we hung up, I sat with my palms pressed into the desk and watched the orange alert blink, 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 until it resolved to green, as if even the system understood how to behave better than my family. 10 minutes later, my sister called. "Liv, Dad told me, and I feel awful," she sang, breathy and bright. "You'd love Aspen at Christmas, and the Hamptons in Summerall, and Bradley's mum does this cranberry sauce with bourbon. I'll send you the recipe." I stood and walked to the window, trying not to listen to the parts of me that still wanted her approval the way a sunflower wants light. "I'll be fine, Ness. Of course you will," she said, the way people say of course when they mean I don't want to think about this. "Love you." That night I ordered an overpriced Thanksgiving package for 2 and ate alone at my kitchen island. I opened one of the bottles of wine I'd planned to bring to my parents' house. Instagram fed me a carousel of my family, my sister's hair in soft curls, my father's hand on Bradley's shoulder, a long table groaning with sides. The comments were a chorus. "Stunning. Goals. Blessed." The photo looked like a magazine ad for togetherness. It also looked like a version of my life from which I had been deliberately erased. Here's what I hadn't told them, because every time I started, the conversation veered. I run a cybersecurity company called Shieldline. We handle risk for banks that measure failure in billions, not thousands. It's not glamorous, and it's not the kind of thing you can explain in the time it takes to pass the gravy. But it's real. Peril, audits, breaches, lives impacted. And in that quiet after pie and emails, I realized the ache sitting in my chest wasn't just hurt. It was grief for a fantasy I'd been carrying around. That one day I would say the exact right sentence and my dad's face would change, and he would finally see me. I decided to stop chasing that moment. 3 weeks later, my mum texted, "Christmas Eve dinner at ours. Wear the blue dress. Let others speak." I didn't own the blue dress anymore. That version of me, quiet, pleasing, strategic about being small, was in a charity shop, waiting for someone else to try her on. I bought an emerald pantsuit that made my shoulders look like a promise, and I booked my waxing appointment and closed a minor contract and finished wrapping gifts that were thoughtful without being performative. I told myself, "You will go, you will be kind, you will not audition." Christmas Eve smelled like nutmeg and ambition. My father introduced Bradley with both hands like he was presenting a watch. Bradley shook mine firmly and began dropping names like confetti: governors, partners, family offices, while the fairy lights glanced off his Rolex. "Tech's a bubble," he said cheerfully, angling his wrist. "Money needs somewhere real to live." "Congrats on the engagement," I said later, when Vanessa clinked her glass and held her hand up. The ring was a small chandelier. Hugs, kisses, mum's tears. My father looked at Vanessa as if she'd solved a very old math problem. Dessert came with more theater, and then, between canapés, Bradley said, "There's this security firm that's absolutely exploding, needs marketing people who can translate geek into English. Might be perfect for Vanessa." My fork paused over a too sweet tart. "What's it called?" "Shieldline," he said. "Odd name, but apparently the CEO is some kind of algorithm whisperer." I took a sip of water and hid my face in the rim glass. "Sounds exciting." Here's the thing, the temptation to reveal myself burned through me like a flare. I could end the performance right here, expose the hypocrisy, enjoy the gasp. Instead, I felt an even sharper impulse to let the truth arrive on its own steam. Let it be indisputable and unperformed. I went home through streets glossed with salt and frost, and I promised myself I would stop explaining my worth to people who had already priced it at zero. 2 days later, at the office, we signed a multi-year contract with a federal institution. My team applauded, then ordered pizza, and I pretended not to notice the intern crying from relief. That week, I began therapy. A woman named Dr. Singh tilted her head and said, "Where did you learn to apologize before you state a fact?" I didn't have an answer. On Friday morning, my HR director sent an email. Candidate, Vanessa Carter, final interview for Senior Marketing Director. I read it 3 times because sometimes reality reads like a prank. Any relation? She'd written, tongue in cheek. Because she'd been around long enough to know I avoid mixing professional and personal like it's acid and base. I replied, yes. Treat her like any other finalist. I'll sit in for the last round, same as always. Then I turned and looked at the city and felt something both foreign and familiar move through me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even vindication. It was steadiness. And then the day of the interview arrived, and the glass-walled room we use for high-stakes conversations reflected me back like a warning and a promise. And when the door opened, the first face to appear belonged to my sister. She smiled like we were still 8 and 12 and about to split a stolen biscuit. "Miss Carter?" HR chirped behind her. "Come in," I said, and I stood to shake her hand, and that is when everything I'd held in my chest for years finally had a place to land. Vanessa's hand slid into mine, and I watched the recognition crawl across her face. First confusion, like she'd walked into the wrong film, then shock, then that frantic flicker that means the brain is doing admin at high speed. HR's voice cut cleanly through the tension. "And this is our founder and CEO, Miss Olivia Carter." "Liv," she whispered, still mid-handshake. To her credit, she recovered, chin lifted, breath even, and took her seat across from me. I saw her tuck a strand of hair still perfectly waved behind one ear, the way our mother does when she's being careful. My COO Jess sat to my left, our marketing lead Aaron to my right, and Diane from HR at the end of the table with a neat stack of printed resumes, case prompts, reference notes. "We'll start with a practical," I said, keeping my voice in the middle register where my authority lives. "You're launching a new service for a risk-averse bank 6 weeks after a reputational breach. Walk us through your audience segmentation, channel sequencing, and how you handle compliance sign-off without killing momentum." Vanessa smiled. "Absolutely." She spoke confidently, about tone reassuring, not robotic, and then defaulted to a slogan. "Trust isn't something you download," she said, as if that was a plan. Aaron nodded, encouraging. "What channels, in what order, and why?" She offered. "Social, email, landing page, PR, investor call." "In what order?" he repeated gently. She blinked. "Concurrently? Compliance?" I asked. Silence became a fog. "Legal review thresholds? FINRA? OCC? How do you tailor for institutional vs. retail messaging?" I kept it kind. She stumbled. "We had a similar situation at Lux," she said. Aaron flipped a page. "You were a brand associate there," he said, neutral. "What did you directly own?" "Copy drafts," she said, and I watched shame creep up her neck like a tide. It wasn't that she was incompetent. It's that she was new. The director's seat was a cliff edge if you didn't know the terrain. Diane slid a reference check summary to me, asterisks next to team lead on her CV, notes in the margin. Coordinated cross-functionally. Did not directly manage. I set it aside. "Tell me about a time a financial client challenged your pitch on risk terms and how you translated the concern into language that moved them." She had nothing. Or she had something, but it lived in someone else's mouth, and she'd never had to make it hers. I was lining up a softer prompt when the receptionist appeared behind the glass with the frantic wave reserved for fire drills and heads of state. I frowned. The door opened and my parents blew in like weather, Mum beaming, Dad flushed from the cold, both breathless. "We came to surprise," Mum said, then saw me at the head of the table and faltered. Dad's gaze hit my nameplate, then ricocheted around the room, a quick audit before landing back on me. The look on his face carried a decade of misfiling. "You're in an interview," I said carefully, keeping my voice steady as Jess stood. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," she said in that velvet steel tone that calms bankers and CTOs alike. "If you'll wait outside, will be an interview?" Dad repeated, as if I'd declared myself a dentist mid-root canal. He took a step farther into the room. "What is this, Dad?" Vanessa said, low. She shot me a look I couldn't Read apology wrapped around panic. Jess moved to the door, hands open, body language pure de-escalation. I watched my mother's eyes travel over the room, taking in the logo on the wall, the printed agendas, the screensaver that cycled through anonymized security metrics. She put a hand on the back of an empty chair, steadying herself. It would have been chaos if not for the next arrival. So sorry, Bradley said, out of breath, his long coat swinging as he stepped in. Parking nightmare. He stopped when he saw me. He looked at the logo on the screen shield line and then at my nameplate. His mouth opened, then closed. You're that Olivia Carter? Jess didn't move, didn't blink. Miss Carter. Founded Shield Line, she said. We protect several major banks and a federal institution. Bradley's posture changed by degrees, like someone adjusting blinds, from performative poise to something less adorned. Right, he said, swallowing. My father glanced between him and me, reading the sudden shift like a man trying to understand a market swing without the charts. He set his jaw. We should talk about this, he said to me, in front of my employees, the way he'd told me to sit Thanksgiving out. We are talking, I said simply, and I nodded toward Jess. She ushered my parents and Bradley back into the hall and shut the door with the softest click I've ever heard. Inside, the quiet Vanessa's breathing sounded like paper. She stared at her CV as if it might write a different story if she willed it hard enough. I could have continued the interview. I could have ended it. Instead, I reached into the folder Diane had slipped me earlier, the one that had turned my annoyance into something colder, and slid a redacted printout across the table. Before we go on, I said, we need to address this. Vanessa picked it up with shaking hands. Her eyes moved quickly across the lines. She flinched at a phrase as if it had teeth. Then she looked up at me, cheeks blazing. What is this? Email, I said. A board member asking HR to fast track you for optics. She stared, mute. Aaron looked down. Diane's mouth was a thin line. I folded my hands together on the table so I wouldn't clench them. Liv, I didn't know, she said, the words small. I believe you, I replied. But I don't run a company where people leapfrog because a man on a golf course says so. She blinked, and the first hair didn't fall. She was too proud for that. My chest hurt for both of us, her caught in a machine she didn't even know she was riding. Me finally refusing toilet, a soft knock. Jess opened the door a crack. There in the lounge, she murmured. And, waiting. I nodded. I turned back to my sister and inhaled. We can continue, I said, or we can pause. But after the break, there are going to be some truths in the room that won't move just because we find them uncomfortable. She nodded, a small, stunned motion. 5 minutes? She whispered. Take 10, I said, and as she stood, she reached for the back of the chair and missed. Fingers barely grazing the wood. I watched her walk out into the glass corridor where our parents sat under a framed print that says security is a team sport. My father gestured. My mother spoke. Bradley kept his eyes on the coffee table like it had answers. And in that moment between what had been and what was about to be, I understood that the next words out of my mouth would change the architecture of my family forever. We reconvened at the table as if we were surgeons scrubbing back in. Jess returned to her seat. Aaron refreshed the deck, and Diane closed the glass door firmly, ensuring the corridor's drama stayed where it belonged, outside. Shall we continue? I asked, and when Vanessa nodded, I gave her an easier lane. Tell us about a time you had to learn a product quickly and explain it to a non-technical audience. She found a story about a cosmetics formulation, about translating lab language into benefits. It wasn't the wrong muscle. It just wasn't strong enough for our world. She kept glancing at the email in front of her, that blacked-out line for optics pulsing like a bruise. When we'd gathered enough for fairness, I closed my notebook. Thank you, I said. We'll discuss as a panel. Can I ask? She stopped, swallowed. Are you going to tell Dad? The word Dad hung in the room like a small ghost. I looked her in the eye. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. The truth doesn't require permission. We stepped into the corridor. My mother rose before she really stood, her hands in that fluttery half position like she was catching a falling tray. How did it go? She asked, eyes darting between us. We're deliberating, I said, professional even here. My father's face was set in marble. What is all this? He demanded. Why is your name on everything? Because I built it, I said. Jess cleared her throat. Let's move to a private room, she suggested gently, and guided us into a smaller conference space with a view that looked like a desktop wallpaper. We sat, me at the head, Jess to my left, my parents and Bradley on one side, Vanessa on the other, like the subject of a portrait no one had agreed how to paint. I didn't give a speech. I just laid facts down one at a time like stepping stones. 7 years ago, I started Shieldline from my studio flat. Our first pilot was a regional bank. Today, we secure data for several majors and a federal institution. We employ 121 people. My father's expression flickered in increments, like a bad connection. Why wouldn't you tell us? He asked finally, the question tagged with accusation. I tried, I said. I sent links. I brought news. I said words like contract and hiring and innovation. You changed the subject of Vanessa's weekend or a golf story or a comment about my shoes. You make everything political, he said. I make things specific, I replied. Bradley cleared his throat. For what it's worth, he said, choosing his words, my father's partner has mentioned Shieldline to me for months. If I'd known, he stopped. There are no neat endings to those sentences. My mother looked from him to me, to the skyline and back. I don't understand why you didn't just say I'm important and make us listen, because you shouldn't have to preface truth to get it heard, I said, and I didn't mean just at home. My father leaned back. What about the job? He asked, like a man getting down to the real agenda. He gestured toward Vanessa, who stared hard at the middle distance. She's a finalist. Surely you can know, I said. The word came out clean. Not for director. She doesn't have the experience, and we don't hire for optics. What does that even mean? He snapped. I slid the redacted email toward him. He read it. His face drained, then colored. Who is this? He asked, tapping the black rectangle where a name had been. Someone who should know better, I said. Vanessa made a small sound, like someone exhaling underwater. I didn't ask for this, she said. I didn't know. I believe you, I repeated. Which is exactly why I'm going to make you an offer that's fair. Mum straightened. Dad scowled. Bradley looked down. I turned to Vanessa. We have a training program in marketing. It's not glamorous. It starts low. You'll shadow client calls, learn compliance, sit with risk, iterate messaging, get rejected by stakeholders 10 times before a single head of compliance says fine. If you're good, you'll rise. If not, you won't. My father made a sound. You would do this to your own sister? I would do this for her, I said, because I won't set her up to fail or tell my team their work comes second to a surname. Silence expanded to fill the room's corners. Finally, Vanessa asked, if I say yes, you'll treat me like any other hire? That's the point, I said. She looked at Bradley. He held her gaze, and this surprised me, didn't speak. He just nodded, a small, serious nod. Give me 1 day, she said. Take it, I answered, and stood to end the meeting. As I reached for the door handle, my mother touched my arm. We should have known, she whispered, and there it was, a fault line opening to something more than defense. We'll talk, I said, at my place. Tomorrow? I walked Jess back to the main room. She reached out, squeezed my shoulder once, and said, you were steady. I feel like I swallowed sand, I said. Steady, she repeated, and smiled with her eyes. You'll want to write a memo tonight. For HR? For yourself, she said. So you remember how this felt when anyone tries to rewrite it? And then my phone vibrated. Mum, dinner tomorrow? We'll bring dessert. I stared at the message for a long time. When I finally looked up, the city was beginning its blue hour. My reflection hovered in the glass, and behind it, the office. Lights looked like constellations. I could almost name, and I realized the next chapter of this story wasn't happening at the office at all. They came to my flat the next night before the sky fully darkened. Mum carried a pie like an apology. Dad scanned the skyline, hands in his pockets, as if the city might offer him a market report explaining how his elder daughter had become someone with a corner view. We ate politely. My father complimented the chairs. My mother said, this lamb is so tender 3 times, so I knew she was nervous. Bradley asked about parking. Vanessa sat very straight and said little. I uncorked a bottle of wine and poured gently, like silence needed something to float on. When plates were cleared, Jess arrived not by accident. She'd texted earlier. Swing by with cake? Safety net. I said yes. She hugged my mother with professional warmth and my father with respect that didn't bend. She and Bradley exchanged the awkward hello of two people who now understand each other's orbit. Mum asked to see the view from the balcony. We stepped out into air that smelled like snow. The city systems hummed, a softer, wider version of the dashboards I stare at. She rested her hands on the railing and took a breath. I wanted to be a head teacher, she said abruptly, eyes still on the lights. I finished the coursework. I had an interview lined up, and then your father, well, he liked his dinner hot, and I liked not arguing. I told myself there would be time later. I stood very still. I didn't know, I said, and I meant it all. She nodded once, a jerky motion. I should have stood up for you. When your father changed the subject, when he praised Vanessa for being charming and called you intense, she let out a laugh that wasn't a laugh. I thought I was keeping peace. I was just keeping quiet. I didn't cry. I also didn't pretend her words erased the ache. Some apologies are a soft hand on a bruise, gentle, late, still helpful. Thank you, I said, and it loosened something under my ribs. Inside, Jess and Dad were talking about football as if that language could bridge any river. Bradley sipped water like he was practicing restraint. Vanessa was looking at a painting above my bookcase, a cheap print I loved for its stubborn color. When I stepped back in, she turned. Do you actually like that? She asked, not unkindly. I do, I said. She nodded. It's very you. Then quieter. I texted our everyone looked up. I'm taking the training program, she said. Entry level, no special anything. Dad made a small noise. Ness, she held up her hand. If I do it your way, it'll be mine, she said, and looked at me when she said mine. I saw something dawn behind my father's eyes, not pride, not yet, but the suspicion that his old map might be missing a road. We ate Jess's cake. We talked about nothing and a little about something. My parents left early, blaming the weather. Bradley offered to help with dishes. I told him no when the door shut behind them. The flat exhaled. Jess leaned against the counter and studied me. You okay? Not even a little, I said, and then after a beat, but in a new way. She nodded. That's the kind that heals. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa started at Shield Line. She failed her first compliance quiz and stayed late rewriting a landing page until it read like actual human English. She shadowed analysts, sat in on a post-mortem where a client's internal team had ignored a recommendation and paid for it, took notes like she was being graded, and then asked Aaron to grade them anyway. She slipped once, I can just email Dad's friend, and caught herself mid-sentence like a person stepping off a curb that wasn't there. No, she said, out loud, to herself more than anyone. That's not how this works. At home, the shifts were smaller. My father called one evening and asked how my firm was doing, like he'd learned the right noun but hadn't figured out the adjectives. Busy, I said. Good. He told me about his backswing. I told him nothing about the new risk model we were piloting. It felt right the first time. Our boundaries felt like a fence we both leaned on instead of something I had to hold up alone. Then came the company anniversary, a town hall with cake and awkward dancing and a slideshow containing exactly 0 embarrassing baby photos because I control the slides. I stood on the stage in a black jumpsuit and talked about where we'd been and where we were going. Our board chair presented me with a leadership award, quiet, internal, meaningful. The applause rose and rolled. I saw my father in the crowd, next to my mother, clapping a beat too long, like he was trying to make up for the years the sound never left his hands. Later that night, I drafted a policy update with Jess. No interference hiring clause, clear language, signed by every board member including the one who'd tried to fast-track my sister. No more emails like that. Not here. I slept hard for the first time in months. The next morning I woke to a city wiped clean by snow, a text from my mother, photo of her scarf, caption too much, and an email from a client calling our last incident response calm in a bottle. And then my phone buzzed again, and I saw my father's name. I almost let it ring out. Instead I answered. He cleared his throat. I said some things, he began. You did, I said. I'm working on it, he said, and it was the most honest sentence he'd ever given me. Me too, I said, a pause that wasn't hostile. Dinner Sunday? He asked. Here, I said. I'll cook. He laughed genuinely. You never liked cooking. I like hosting, I said. Right, he said, as if that word were a map key he'd just discovered. When we hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long second, and then my phone buzzed one more time, a calendar invite from her probation. Check in, Vanessa Carter. I smiled. Accountability, alias of love, and because every story has one more turn, I opened my inbox and saw a name I'd not expected to see again. The board member who'd sent the fast-track email wanted a call. To apologize, the subject line said. I clicked it open and read the first line and decided how I wanted the ending to sound. The call with the board member happened at a.m. on a Tuesday, because apologies sound more sincere over black coffee than champagne. He didn't waste time. I tried to use influence I shouldn't have, he said. It was wrong. I'm signing the clause. No caveats. Thank you, I said. The clause isn't punishment. It's a guardrail. He surprised me by laughing softly. Spoken like a security professional. Exactly, I said. Vanessa's probation review fell on a Wednesday in a room with nothing but a whiteboard and a carafe of water because people reveal themselves best without theatrics. Erin led. She'd passed 2 compliance modules on. Retake had contributed copy to a pilot campaign that converted 9% better with a risky audience, and had taken a chewing out from a client PM without crying or clapping back. I was tempted, she admitted. But the thing about trying to earn something is you realize you have to be teachable first. After the review, I caught her by the lift. Fancy a sandwich? I asked, and we took ours to the little park behind the building where office workers pretend nature lives in straight lines. I wanted to be mad at you, she said between bites. For not telling me, for letting me walk in there, and she waved a hand, letting the sentence decay. I wanted to tell you, I said. 1,000 times. It never felt like a conversation I was being invited to have. She studied a bench, its metal slats still damp from last night's snow. I thought, she said slowly, that being loved was the same as being chosen, that if people chose me, I must be valuable. She looked at me. It turns out being valuable might be choosing yourself. Wild, isn't it? I said, and we smiled at the same time, like children recognizing a secret handshake. Sunday dinner at mine was awkward in the way first rehabilitations are. My father handed me a bottle of wine like an admission ticket. He didn't comment on my shoes or my hair or my voice. My mother asked for help setting the table and then didn't correct me when I put the forks on the outside. Bradley asked if I'd read a book about incident response. I told him I had and that it was mostly accurate except for the part where you can control the timeline. He laughed and said, I'm learning that everywhere. After dessert, my father lingered while my mother and Vanessa washed up, the domestic choreography of a family relearning itself. He cleared his throat. I wasn't proud of you because I didn't understand you, he said, and because I thought. He stopped. Beginnings are hard. Anyway, I'm working on it. I heard you the first time, I said. I appreciate you saying it again. He nodded, solemn. That suit you wore at Christmas made you look like your mother, he added. In a good way. Like you were choosing something. I was, I said. When they left, I stood at the door for a long minute. The flat felt different, wider, not emptier. I made tea and took it to the window and watched the city edit itself from gold to steel. I thought about the girl who tore apart old computers at 12 and the woman who built a company from parts no one considered valuable, and I gave them both the same sentence. You did well. Here is the resolution you asked for. The part stories usually trim because it doesn't fit on a thumbnail. Nothing exploded, and nothing became perfect. Instead, things shifted. Policies changed. Habits softened. Apologies arrived late and still mattered. My sister learned to stand on her own feet at work. My father learned to sit with discomfort without filling it with instructions. My mother found a local program for women finishing degrees later in life and sent me a photo of her with a stack of books taller than the cranberry sauce. A T-shield line. I asked HR to build a merit-first hiring workshop for managers, and I taught the first session with Jess. We wrote no shortcuts on the whiteboard and underlined it twice. It wasn't just about my family. It was about the kind of place I wanted to lead, one where the truth didn't need a megaphone to be believed. On a Wednesday afternoon, a junior analyst pinged me with a screenshot of a small anomaly, a blip that looked like nothing but felt like the start of a story. We triaged it, escalated, contained. Nobody outside our walls ever knew. That's the work. Make the dangerous moments boring. Make the right thing normal. People think leadership is the speech. Often it's the email you send after, codifying what you said when the room was watching into rules that hold when nobody is. And for me, daughter, sister, the lesson was simpler, harder, heavier to carry, and lighter once you do. You cannot rent your worth from other people. You have to own the title deed. Approval is sweet. Peace is sweeter. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors you get to open or keep closed because the house is yours. I don't know how this story reads from the outside. Maybe it reads as revenge, but if you were in my bones, you'd know it isn't. Revenge wants someone to hurt. I wanted fairness, and then I wanted mercy, and then I wanted a life that felt like mine even when the room was full. So that's where I'll leave you, with a family still itself but kinder. With a company a little stronger because its rules are clearer, with a sister who chose the hard road because it led to her, with a father who claps a beat too long and means it, with a mother who sent me a selfie from a classroom under fluorescent lights with a caption that said, "Starting again at 57. Wish me luck." What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real life stories.